Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to a series of 3 talks that has been facilitated by the Chancery of the Singapore Archdiocese Archives Department. We are pleased to present our so-called honor speakers who's going to tell you very exciting heritage, history, and interesting stories of the churches, of the cathedrals, St. Peter and Paul, and St. Joseph's. But first and foremost, this session will be on the Cathedral of the Good Shepherd. And before that, I'd like to introduce my colleagues from the Chancery Archives. We've got Jennifer Joseph there, and I've got from the Chancery Office, Juliana, and our assistant there, Marion. Thank you. Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite our most so-called honorable guest speaker today is Javon, and Javon is the Master of Ceremonies with the Cathedral of the Good Shepherd, and is also the co-head of the Cathedral's Heritage Ministry. So definitely he has got a lot of stories to tell about the cathedral. So without further ado, Javon, please. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming down. So today my talk is going to be about 45 minutes. So actually there's so much stories to share with you, but I won't be able to cover everything today. Right? So I'll actually take you through my slides quite quickly, and we'll try to maybe dedicate about 5 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes, right, for Q&A. Okay. So without further ado, yes, Cathedral of the Good Shepherd, you see the building over here. It was established in 1832, okay, and it is actually the oldest, right, Catholic church in Singapore, and at the same time the mother church of our archdiocese. Yeah. Now, before I actually go into all the history and all the stories, the interesting stories, I wanted to basically just share with you what exactly is a cathedral, right? How did the word cathedral come from? Basically, okay, according to the Ceremonial of Bishops, right? The Ceremonial of Bishops is actually a book whereby it instructs the bishops on what to do during Mass and all other ceremonies. Yeah, so according to that book, it says that the cathedral church is the site of the bishop's chair. And this bishop's chair over here, you should see Archbishop Ringo is sitting on. The name of that chair is called cathedra. In Greek, it means seat. Okay, the seat of the bishop. And that is that root word where the name cathedral takes from. And that is why whenever there is a cathedral, a cathedra within a church, that church is the cathedral, which is the bishop's church, the bishop's seat. Okay, and not only is just merely functioning as a seat, but it's actually a symbol of the unity of all of us believers, right, under the authority of the bishop. Okay. Now I'm going to share with you this is Pope Paul's Apostolic Constitution. Okay, when he declared the Jubilee in 1966, it says the cathedral should be regarded as the image of Christ, one mystical body, okay, one body, okay, whose members join together, right? And it's also an express image of his visible church where all of us, we pray, we sing, we do everything together. And hence, that is why the cathedral is actually the center, or is supposed to be the center of the liturgical life of the diocese, okay, living symbol of our unity in that one faith that we share. And at the end of the day, that is why we are called Mother Church. We don't just call Mother Church. Why? Because Mother have many children, right? It calls all the children together. So that is the function of the cathedral also. It's not just because, oh, the cathedral is the oldest church, that's why it's the mother. That's not. But it's because of that symbolism of the cathedral being that symbol of that one unity of the whole church, okay, where the bishop has his seat. Now, what I'm going to do is quickly take through the timeline actually of the cathedral, okay, and when I take you through this timeline, I will share with you some interesting stories. Yeah. Okay, so the origins of our cathedral in Singapore actually dates all the way back to 1821. But before that, I wanted to also ask you, okay, when did Sir Stamford Raffles come to Singapore? Can anybody volunteer and answer?
1819.
1819, very good. History, 100 marks. Huh? Okay, so, yes, about 2 years later, the first French missionaries actually arrived in Singapore. Now, the key French missionary that arrived in Singapore was Saint Laurent Ambert. He's pictured over here. He was actually supposed to, from France, okay, travel to China. But on the way, he had to pass by Malaysia side, Singapore, and then route to China, right? And at that time in Penang, there was a lecturer teaching in the seminary who fell sick. So he was asked to go and stand in. But while he was there, the bishop, who was then based in Siam, asked him, can you come down to Singapore? And at that time, Singapore was, what, 2 years old only, right? Can you come down to go and check on how many Catholics are there? Because it seemed like for the past few years, there had been, some inkling of Catholics already being based in Singapore. So whether is it worth it to open some kind of a missionary station in Singapore to minister to them? So he came to Singapore, all right, and what did he see? He saw 12 or 13 Catholics, right, that were seemingly leading a very wretched life. This is what he said when he reported back to his bishop. But he thought that, even if it's just 12 or 13, maybe, you could at least send a missionary down to Singapore once in a while to at least say Mass for the people. Otherwise, indeed, very wretched, right? You can't even attend Mass. Okay, so this was what he wrote back to the bishop. But at that time, right, in Singapore, and as well as in Malacca and elsewhere in this region, there was an issue between who was supposed to be in charge of the church in this area. Okay, so I'm going to wind back to the early days, many hundreds of years before, where at that time it was the age of exploration. Okay, and during that age of exploration, we had two big naval powers, right? We had Portugal and we had Spain. And at that time, as the explorers went to explore the known world, right, they would also bring the faith to the people. And at that time, to prevent fighting among these two very major naval powers, the Pope decided to divide the world into half. Okay, so from the east of Europe, okay, he actually allocated it to the Portuguese, and to the west of Europe, he allocated it to the Spanish. And that was how the world was split into half. So Spanish don't touch the Portuguese side, please don't go and touch the Spanish side. Okay, but what happened was that, fast forward to the 1600s, the popes were thinking, how can we just leave evangelization to all these political powers? So what happened was that the Pope established, a network of bishops, who would actually report directly to the Pope for evangelization purposes. And they actually established, through the French missionaries, a base in Siam, and it was called the Vicariate Apostolic of Siam at that time. And just now, remember when I mentioned that Saint Laurent Ambert was so-called, had to report to his bishop, he was reporting to that bishop in Siam. Okay, and at that time, Singapore, being off to the east of Europe, belonged to which political power? Portuguese, correct. And that was why the bishop that was based in Siam under the French was quite hesitant to send anyone to Singapore to establish a church here, even though Laurent Ambert said, hey, maybe you can send some people here. So the bishop hesitated, all the way until 1832. And that was because a few years before 1832, they actually wrote to Rome, and Rome decided that actually Singapore would fall under the jurisdiction of the French. But the Portuguese, who had already established a presence in the island, would have none of it. So this, kind of conflict went on and on and on. But in any case, yes, we were established in 1832, and that's why in my first slide I showed that 1832, that was the establishment of the church in Singapore. Okay, contrary to popular belief, everybody thought that Saint Laurent Ambert is the first missionary to come to Singapore, or the first French missionary that came to Singapore. We did some checks and found out that Laurent Ambert came to Singapore in December 1821. Actually, there was another priest that came earlier in October. That was Father Picot. But when Picot came, Picot did not come on a mission to find out how many Catholics was there. He was just passing by. Okay? And although he was just passing by, he reported back to his bishop also, and he said, I do not think this would be any place to sow a mustard seed. Let's just give up with Singapore. Yeah, so at least Laurent Ambert gave some glimmer of hope that there is some potential for a church in Singapore. Okay, so now you see some pictures over here. Laurent Ambert didn't stay on in Singapore, right? He only spent a few days here. Later on, he actually went to China because that was his main purpose. He founded a seminary in China, and thereafter he was appointed to be the Vicar Apostolic, which is some kind of a bishop, but not really because it's not a diocese, okay? A Vicar Apostolic of Korea. And at that time in Korea, there was heavy persecution. So long as you are a Christian, you will be beheaded, okay? So what happened was that they were all practicing religion in secret. And one fine day, Laurent Ambert, like Christ, was betrayed. He was outed to the police in Korea, and he was captured. Now, the story was that when Laurent Ambert was captured, he was interrogated, and he was actually, in a sense, forced to tell where are all his followers, all the Catholics. Okay, he wouldn't give in, but he wrote a letter to his two other priests, Fathers Maubon, Father Chestin, and said that if you, the three of us leaders, are to come out and sacrifice ourselves, I'm sure the Korean authorities will not harm the other Catholic followers, our lay people. So the two priests listened to the bishop. They all came to report themselves. They were interrogated for about 3 over days, okay, because the Korean authorities didn't keep to their promise. Okay, they still wanted to find all the Catholics to kill them or persecute them. They didn't give up, and Laurent Ambert finally was sent to the beheading grounds. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share with you how they actually went to the beheading grounds. Okay, in Korea, in a place called Saenamteo. Okay, today it is actually one of the shrines in Seoul. Okay, it's actually by the river. That was the execution ground outside of the city. The 3 priests were actually brought like this in a picture, okay, bound up, and then they were brought to the execution ground. At the execution ground, there would have been a stake over here, and the priests would have had some kind of a spear pierced through their ears. Okay, and then their hair would be tied up to the top of the pole. And the executioner would have had a big sword, and he would drink so that he get intoxicated. And after he get intoxicated, he would do a dance, somewhere like a ritual dance. So he would go around swinging and swinging and swinging, and with one strong blow, he chops off the head, and the head rolls on the ground. Now, it's the same thing, when our Lord was crucified, the followers were all hiding and scared. Same thing happened here. The Christians, after their leaders were all beheaded, were all in hiding. But finally, okay, they gained some courage. They went back to the grounds to quickly go and pick up the bones. And that is why today we have a relic of Saint Laurent Ambert in the Cathedral of the Good Shepherd. If you go to the baptistry, there is a kind of a plaque where inside is some kind of a bone. A lot of people ask me, hey, what kind of bone? Is it the rib bone, the finger bone, or the toe bone? I say, I don't know. Okay, there's no label there. I didn't tell you what kind of bone it is. But from the looks of it, it seems like it could be one of the either the finger bone or the toe bone. It's a very big piece. It's very rare to get a big piece of a saint's relic. Okay. All right. So I'll just move on. Maybe before I move on this slide, so you see what happens is that the Good Shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. This was exactly what Saint Laurent Ambert wrote to his two priests to say, like, the good in desperate circumstances. Okay, the Good Shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. Hence, let's sacrifice himself. So in a way, when the time came actually to name our church, choosing what name, is it maybe Cathedral of St. Mary, Church of St. Mary, Church of St. Bernadette or whatever? No, okay? It was Church of the Good Shepherd, okay, to actually commemorate this great sacrifice of Saint Laurent Ambert. So, 1832, okay, our church was first established. The first priest that arrived in Singapore, okay, to start this mission was actually a priest called Father Pierre Clemenceau. Okay, not the Clemenceau Road Clemenceau. He's a different person. Okay, but he stayed here only for a while, because if we look at the baptismal records, the first baptism that occurred in October 1832 do not bear his name. We see Elbrand, okay, Father Elbrand. And Father Elbrand was the one who then started to raise money to build the first chapel. Okay, so a lot of people ask, hey, 1832, where did they worship? I mean, with any other missionary areas, you just find a place that has shelter. So they actually worshipped at the house of a person called Dennis McSweeney, who was a contractor at that time, quite an influential member of the merchant community and the contractor community in Singapore. Okay, so where was the house? The house was actually located somewhere near the junction of Bras Basah Road and Victoria Street. Okay, that was the first location. Then after money was raised over 1 year, they built the church. At the time it was not called a church, it was a chapel. And it opened in 1833. Okay, so if you look at the map, this is the current Cathedral of the Good Shepherd location. St. Peter and Paul is somewhere around here where my pointer is. SJI, the old SJI, that's the small little dot in red. Okay, that was the location of the first Catholic chapel. It was actually an attap kind of a roof with wooden planks for the walls. Okay, even the altar also very simple. Everything was very simple at the time. We did some searching in some old records and found out that this chapel was actually dedicated to not only just the Good Shepherd but Saint Francis Xavier. Okay, and that dedication of that place of worship happened as in the church, the chapel was opened, okay, 9 June 1833 by Father Elbrand, who actually raised money to build the church. Okay, and I will just bring your attention back again to the baptismal register, and we will see that in this baptismal register you can't really make out the words, it's a bit blurred, but it does say that it was Father Elbrand that actually dedicated, okay, the chapel, okay, on the date of 9 June 1833. And if you look on the right of the baptismal register, very curious, what are all these Chinese, words? I mean, today you get baptized, you go to the church office, you write everything in English, okay, but in the old days, it seemed from the baptismal records, there were a lot of converts from the Chinese community, and they were really joining the church in droves. And therefore, it seemed very likely that, or definitely, that your chapel cannot stay as a chapel, it has to expand, correct? Okay, so basically we move on to the arrival of this priest from France, also from the same order. Okay, the the MEP order, Father Jean-Marie Burel, his passport, it says that, he had a red hair, very burly, kind of a stout, kind of a figure, very authoritative kind of a figure, but he really get what he wants to do for the good of the church, right? Like bringing, for example, I'm not sure, but some of you might have heard that he was actually the one instrumental to bring the brothers, LaSalle brothers to Singapore, as well as the IJ sisters to Singapore. Okay, so he came in 1839, and actually coincidentally, that was also the year when Saint Laurent Ambert was beheaded in Korea. Okay, so if you go to the Cathedral of the Good Shepherd, okay, in our St. Joseph's Chapel, you will see a memorial plaque to Father Burel. And one of Father Burel's contributions also to our diocese over here, not only bringing education to Singapore, okay, but he was a very meticulous record keeper. So a lot of our history, if you look at Going Forth, for example, the book, right? Some of you might have that book, Going Forth, or the book that was recently published, right? What's that? Outpost to Church, yeah. A lot of the primary materials would have come from Father Burel's annals, right? He was so detailed as to mention when he arrived in Singapore into the and took over the possession of the chapel, missionary chapel, how many pieces of vestments, how much money was spent. I need to buy oil for the sanctuary lamp, how much is it? Everything is recorded down. All his correspondence with other priests all also recorded down. So this really was is a very, very important document that we really have to thank Father Burel for. Okay, so I'll just move on very quickly in the interest of time. Okay, finally, as I mentioned, the chapel was too small. At that time, the bishop thought that, simple lah, take down one wall, expand the church lah, like what we always do, correct? Or build another floor, that kind of thing. But Father Burel was saying, no, bishop, this location over here, the chapel, I want to use it as the boys' school. Let's find another place for the church. So Bishop was like, okay, you go and talk to the governor and ask the governor which other piece of land the governor can give us. So originally, we were actually offered a piece of land at the foot of Fort Canning, very near the Christian cemetery. So when Father Burel, got that good news from the governor that governor is giving us a piece of land to build a new church, right? Father Burel happily go to the bishop and say, hey, we've got a grant, a land grant. Bishop very strangely said, no, I don't like that piece, I don't like that location. Go and talk to the governor again. And the reason given was because it was too far. Too far, maybe, okay, too far from the activity, around the very much built up parts of town. Because Fort Canning is really, it's a bit more, green, and the cemetery over there, a bit too far. Okay, understandable. So after much negotiation, finally, the location on Queen Street was given to the church to build the Church of the Good Shepherd. And there was a lot of fundraising going on. Father Burel had to travel as far as Manila, China to raise funds. And at the end of the day, the building cost was about 18,000 over Swiss dollars, or Spanish dollars, sorry. Okay. So basically in 1843, after the plans were all drawn to the design of Dennis McSweeney, who was the guy who offered the house for celebration of Mass. The foundation stone was laid. Laid by who? A guy called John Connolly, very interesting character, didn't go to church. So a person who didn't go to church, why lay the foundation stone and take on this very important role, right? Because Father Burel was a very smart man. He knew that John Connolly was very influential, number one. And he knew that if he got John Connolly to lay the foundation stone, John Connolly will come back to church again. So save his soul. okay, in a way. So John Connolly, okay, he laid the foundation stones, which is pictured over here. And I just want to share with you this very short, interesting story that is quite personal to me. Okay, basically, I was actually involved in the restoration of the cathedral. And so, based on the historical records, we knew that there was going to be a foundation stone with a time capsule, because this was all recorded in Charles Berkeley's Anecdotal Old Times, History of Anecdotal Old Times in Singapore. Okay, so this is a record book which says that on that day of laying of the foundation stone, there was a procession from the old chapel to the new site, and there were altar boys, you know, and then there was this John Connolly carrying the stone. So we think, okay, the record says there's a stone. Since cathedral was undergoing renovations, a lot of digging works, right? Asked the contractor to find the stone. And in the records, it said that the stone is at the front of the church. Now, can you all maybe, help me? Front of the church means what? Queen Street or Victoria Street? Who says Queen Street? Queen Street is where the main entrance of the church is. Who says Queen Street? There's a front, is it? Okay, who says Bell Tower side? Bell Tower facing Chimes. That's the front of the church. Okay, who says it's the middle of the church today? Nobody. Okay, I told the contractor it's at the middle of the church. Go and dig at the middle of the church. Because later on, I'll just show you some other, in another slide. In 1888, the church was expanded. So actually, the front door of the church used to be at where the middle of the church was. So I asked the contractor to dig there. The contractor dug, cannot find anything. So we thought, gone forever. Okay, then we fast forward to almost completion of the restoration project. That very evening, I went down to site. I walked around the bell tower area, okay, and then I went home. About 1 or 2 hours later, I got a call. They said the cathedral collapsed. I got a shock of my life. Collapsed. Okay, then they explained, no, not the whole building collapsed, but the pediment where, the triangular part of the roof, okay, collapsed towards the direction of Chimes, pulling along all 8 columns down. So you can see, the whole pediment fell, pulling the 8 columns down. Okay, then no choice, we have to demolish this part because you cannot use back the same bricks to build back this historic building. Okay, and we need to use new structure. But we were thinking, okay, if we demolish all this old structure over here, then what do we do with the bricks? So of course now, if you want to go to cathedral and you want to buy a piece of brick we have, okay, it's on sale, okay, you can buy and help us to raise funds. But at the same time, we thought that, okay, one of the columns, why not let's keep it, okay, as a heritage. So we asked our consultant, who is non-Catholic, go and choose one good piece, good stump. So he chose the most right corner one, nearest to Bras Basah Road. He said, okay, just this one. So we demolished everything except for that stump. Okay, come to the time it was ready to remove the stump, we got a shock. Say, hey, what is this piece of thing doing under the stump? Yeah, this is the stump that's turned sideways already. So this under the stump. They dug it out and we found out, wow, this was the foundation stone with a cross. Okay, and under the stone, buried in a pit, were all these coins. Coins from Vietnam, coins from Spain, coins from the East India Company, even a coin with an image of a chicken on it. Okay, and that coin basically was not really in circulation in the urban areas, but circulation in the plantation, where the plantation owner will actually give the coins to their workers to buy clothes, food, etc. Okay, there was even a piece of token which until today we don't really know what was its purpose, but can guess that maybe it was a token used in the opium den. Now, then the question is, why put all these chapalang things in the time capsule? Okay, it was really, at that time, the thinking is to put whatever reflected the time, what reflected the society. And so in addition to the coins, there were newspapers of the day, as well as a prayer book that was used during the foundation stone laying ceremony. Okay, so all these are today very lovingly being restored by the chancery. Yeah. Okay, so I'll move on. Finally, okay, the church was built in a neoclassical style to the design of Dennis McSweeney. Okay, which look somewhat like a Roman temple, very simple. Look like a town hall, not like the Gothic churches in Europe. Okay, but at that time, this was actually quite popular. So if you go down the road, you see along Hill Street, the Armenian church built in a similar way. Okay, that was the fashion of that time. And then you see the interior of the church, black and white checkerboard floors. This is marble. Okay, and this one, the pews, you can see gates with the, these are all numbers on it. In the old days, you don't pay money, you cannot sit in the pew. Okay, this is called pew rent. Okay, you pay, then you can sit. Okay, then you say, the church, so terrible. No money, cannot come to church. No, not true. Okay, so at the back of the church, there were free pews. Okay, the concept was that because the church had to raise funds to build the church. So there's last time not like today, Catholic Foundation or what, use QR code, all this, right? Don't have. So and then in the old days, they used pew rents to actually raise funds. Okay, so we had the high altar, image of the Good Shepherd, St. Peter's and St. Paul, and this was actually the side chapel. And this over here, familiar or not? Huh? The Pietà, where is it now? Huh? Just outside only, outside this room, okay? So yes, it's outside this room. This exact one is outside the room. So after this talk, you can go and take a look, all right? This is a Di Prato di Regali piece. Okay, the Prato Regali piece from the US. Okay, it was bought very early on in the history of the cathedral, but over the years it deteriorated so much that the inside of the structure of the statue, okay, started to corrode because there's a metal frame. So what happened was that then we actually gave it to St. Peter, St. Paul, and then Father lovingly restored the statue, okay, with his artistry. So today there is a beautiful Pietà just outside this room, okay. So this was how it looked like last time. And then Father Burrell, okay, not only he built the church, he also helped to build the rectory. At that time, this one was the so-called, they call it parochial house, so parish house. Okay, this, at that time when it was first built, it was a parish house, not the bishop's house, because at that time the bishop had not established his base in Singapore yet. Okay, he was based still in Penang. All right. And then the church again, this is a perennial problem. Church always not big enough, okay, always growing. So you can see pre-1888, the church was this small. Post-1888, the church was extended towards the direction of Queen Street, extended by 3 bays. In our records, we found out from the, we call it the book of report of the wardens, okay? Report of the wardens. Inside it mentioned, for the construction, who to pay, how much to pay, etc., etc. We saw the contractor's name. Okay, this contractor's name is Lim Law. Can anybody tell me who Lim Law might be? Correct. Okay, Lim Law was the father of Lim Bo Seng. So in a sense, the cathedral has this kind of a link to our wartime hero Lim Bo Seng, Lim Law. Okay, so if you go to the cathedral today, you walk down the aisle, on the side wall, if you face the main altar on the right side, there's this exposed bricks, okay, which we actually display. On the left side, that's actually old bricks, okay, when the church was built in 1847. On the right side, the extension, 1888. This is to show you where was the line of extension of the church. Now, why the brick so thin? Because technology not so good. And this is what we call gu ta zuan. Gu ta zuan means, okay, the buffalo is used to actually step on the clay, to compact the clay before the brick is put into the kiln to be fired. But of course, 1888 technology had advanced, so they could make bigger bricks and then they can build faster. Okay, so this was what happened in 1888, and it coincided with the re-establishment of the See of Malacca. Okay, so in Rome they decided to re-establish the Diocese of Malacca, and at that time it was Bishop Ngane, okay, who was made the Bishop of Malacca. Okay, this is how he looks like, and he's actually buried at the front of the church, in front of the sanctuary, and according to the records, he was buried 6 feet deep. Okay, so it's not just saying only, it's really 6 feet deep. It was reported in the press of the day, in his full pontificals. So all his chasubles and everything, you know, with the precious stones and everything, he was buried along with all these, okay, into the... Now, when a church is actually elevated to a cathedral, and especially if a church was renovated, the church should be dedicated or consecrated, right? Now, can you see in the next line why the consecration was delayed to 1897? Anybody want to guess why? Delay until so long? Exactly. So, you know, the act of consecration is really offering the building of the church, our building of the church up to God, right? For the sacred services, correct? So how can you still you borrow money from people, build the church, and then you offer these borrowed goods to God? No lah, okay, offer your what you actually, you know, have actually built with your own hands. So because at that time the church was still owing money, therefore they couldn't do the consecration ceremony. And then later on, while this poor bishop was trying to raise money, right, so that the consecration ceremony could take place, but after that he fell ill. So after he fell ill, it was decided that he's too ill to conduct any ceremony, because at that time a consecration ceremony will take at least 4 to 5 hours. Cannot tahan. Okay. So he actually passed away sadly, and then he left the consecration ceremony to his successor, Bishop Fei. So if you go to the cathedral and you see this circular thing, these are consecration stones. This is where the bishop actually anoints, okay, the stones around it, embedded around the walls of the church, all 12 of them signifying the 12 apostles. Okay, on very special solemn occasions, there will be a candle in front of this consecration stone or consecration cross lit up. So for example, like Christmas, okay, you will find the candles lit up. Okay, so the consecration was actually reported in the press at that time, big event. Okay, and then I'll just go faster in the interest of time, right? I don't have much time. Okay, so stained glass was installed. We did some so-called research also, and found out that our stained glass, the half-round ones, are actually from Bruges in Belgium. Okay, they were the same company who did the stained glass in Chimes, the chapel, as well as the missing stained glass in the St. Joseph Institution Chapel, the one that went missing. Okay, and who was the one who donated this? It was actually Bishop Bodon. Now, the one that we have, the two most beautiful stained glasses that we have of Mary and Joseph, those are of unknown provenance. We do not know whether they were made by Jules de Villare. Okay, but in any case, they are very beautiful pieces. We got them restored, and you can see before and after the restoration. So this is after, this is before the restoration. Yeah, I should have switched the photos. You can see how lovingly restored they were. So they were restored by a local-based studio. Okay, and then 1907, we had our Stations of the Cross installed. This very interesting story, they came from the convent, actually. The sisters, I think they are quite entrepreneurial, you know why? Because in the records we read that the sisters sold this set of Station of the Cross to cathedral for $1,000, and they said, don't worry lah, you can take 10 years to pay in installments. So last time also got like courts like that lah, you can pay in installment, yeah? So in any case, as part of the restoration works, we got them restored also. We can see the before and the after, how bright and vivid the colors are. Okay, the origins of this Station of the Cross, they actually come from France in a studio in Paris who produces such religious work for all churches throughout the world. So we actually found out that in Australia, one of the cathedrals, and even in Vietnam, one of the cathedrals, they have this same type of Station of the Cross, the pictures, but not the frame, okay, the pictures. Okay? So 1807, on Palm Sunday, the bishop blessed these Stations of the Cross, and then officially they were used. Okay? That was on Palm Sunday. Okay, later on, okay, there was a need to move out of the parish house. Remember just now I said the bishop's house was actually the parish house? There was a need to move out of the parish house because the bishop needed his personal space. So the work to build the new house fell onto this guy over here, Father Charles Nairn. So Father Charles Nairn, I would say he took an interest in architecture. He was not really an official architect, but he took an interest in architecture, and he was very, very talented. So he not only designed our rectory, which is this Edwardian style, they call it blood and bandage, because red and white, like the fire station that we have at Hill Street. Okay, he designed this one. He also designed the curved wings of the SJI, as well as even the chimes chapel. It was all designed by him. Okay. Now, if you see over here the tiles, according to experts, they say that this is actually the most complete example and extensive example of encaustic tiles that you can find in Singapore. Okay, the cathedral's rectory. And something very interesting about Father Nairn was that if you go to the cenotaph today, you look through all the rows of names commemorated for the war dead, his name is there. And then the question is, why? Why is he involved in military? So apparently, in the old days, not only Singaporeans must do NS, French people also were recalled to do NS. So when the war broke out in Europe, he was actually recalled back to France, and he served as a medic. And subsequently later on, due to ill health, he passed away. He's commemorated in the cenotaph. So I've got the gallery organ. This is the oldest pipe organ that we have. Okay, this is the original. It's a British made. Came to Singapore in bits and pieces. In a sense, like IKEA. So in the old days, there was such thing as IKEA also. Okay, and then the local organ builder, Mr. Gracia, he then followed the instruction, then built the organ. So this was the original organ. But for a long time, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, okay, the organ kind of fell into disuse. Also, the keys and everything. So for a long time, it was not played until a Belgian guy called Hugo Loos came to do some tinkling. But really, the person that was really instrumental to make the organ so fantastic sounding and majestic today is this guy, Robert Narayanam, who is Singapore's only organ builder, locally made organ builder. Okay, so he actually built the two sides also, added more pipes. Originally it was 900 over pipes, but now got more than that. And some of these pipes, interestingly, are actually toilet pipes. Yeah, okay. The toilet pipes are just decorative. They are just at the front, okay. But the working pipes are all at the back. It's just aesthetics. Okay, so what we did was in the latest restoration, we got rid of all the toilet pipes, okay, and then reconfigured the organ, maintaining the center original one. And this was done by a company from the Philippines. We actually brought all the pipes to the Philippines to be reconfigured, and then brought back to Singapore. So now we got 1882 pipes, 1882. And some of these pipes actually come from, because it's not original, some of these pipes come from the very famous St. Clair organ of the Victoria Concert Hall. And who was the one who brought these pipes to the cathedral? Mr. Robert. He was the one who salvaged these pipes. Okay, so yes, we actually went through the war. I think some of you already know the history, might know the history of Pahal. Okay, our poor old Bishop Divaus went to Negri Sembilan to stay with his flock. Okay,
I will not go into much detail here. We can leave it for Q&A if there's time. So in 1973, church was gazetted as a national monument, so protected by the government. Our sanctuary was remodeled a few times, so this pre-war. Then post-war, okay, you see that the lights have changed already and the niches have gone. Okay, and then in the 60s, in 1960, this was actually put in the mosaic piece. Okay, and some people say it's from Alfred Wong, done by Alfred Wong. Okay. And then in the 1990s, renovations by Father Lechet. Always no money one. So what happened was that the flooring, they retain the mosaic, they only renovate the aisles. What people see, renovate lah. People cannot see want to renovate. Okay? And then this was the most recent renovations. We have the main church, we did the gardens, we have got the 24-hour adoration, the crypt for the bishops, new one at the basement, renovated the rectory as well as built a new annex. And for the new annex, we call it Jean-Marie Burel Center to commemorate the efforts of Father Burel. You can see all these, before the works, we even did an archaeological dig to make sure that all the artifacts buried will not be just glossed over. We saved them. And all these works, we did also repair the organ. Remember I told you about sending it to the Philippines? So this is when they brought back the pipes already. The bells we made, last time it was originally moving. Then after it's stationary, now we made it moving again. So it moves, okay, in a traditional way. You see the Station of the Cross repaired, stained glass. Even our big crucifix was lovingly restored. Even our liturgical items, the candlesticks, we had to dismantle and redo. Okay, replate, relacquer. So our marble works came from Spain, they're from Granda. Image of the Good Shepherd, Greco-Roman style, Agnus Dei. Some people ask, hey, what's on the tabernacle? So this is a very close-up image of the tabernacle showing the risen Christ. Okay, it's a risen Christ. And this one behind the main altar, this one nobody can see, that's why I show you this photo. Okay, this one is a lily representing Mother Mary, the lily. She is the first bearer of Christ, and that's why she is under the tabernacle bearing Christ. And Mother Mary perpetually keeping watch under the cross. And that's the meaning of the lily. Okay? So we gave St. Peter and Paul the Pietà. We got another Pietà. This is a one-for-one replica of the one in Rome. And these are gardens. And then we rededicated. So under the altar, we actually have two relics, Francis Xavier and Laurent Humbert. And finally, because of the great restoration works, right, we were awarded 2 awards. The one from UNESCO as well as the one from the Singapore government. So I've come to the end. These are some of the activities that we have. Thank you.